Welcome to the 290th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with author Stacey Tucker, author of Sky of Water, Book 3 of the Equal Night Trilogy. Stay tuned for the interview. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Stacey Tucker, author of the new novel Sky of Water, the third book in the Equal Night Trilogy. Tucker has written for Women's World, Working Mother, and Pop Sugar, and she speaks to teen groups about self-empowerment and awareness in today's social media culture. Stacey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
Well, first, can you read a few pages from your new novel, Sky of Water?
I would love to, yes, thank you. In the first age, in the dark cave of creation, the light of knowledge was infused with the blood of compassion in the womb of earth. The heart light was born. Its power was coveted by those that knew its strength, but soon fractured, the stone could not come to light. So began a world controlled by fear, where the devil was blamed for all sin. A fractured stone meant a fractured humanity, and the dark ones were pleased. But the sands of time have waited for the moment to arrive when the extraordinary magic of the human heart will have another chance to shine again. If the stone can be healed by the pure of heart, its power will be remembered in all souls that walk the earth. Vivian de Clare's apartment sat perched precariously over the lapping waves of the Mediterranean. An ancient gnarled pine clung tenaciously to the exposed face. It hadn't yet decided to succumb to the sea. Vivian's marble deck now hung completely over the side of the cliff. She had made Bari, Italy, her home after the first age, when more land surfaced after the Great Flood. Good memories had soaked into the land there. She had only wanted to remember the good. But now she looked out at the stunted shore beneath her and saw the painful ones returning. Ghostly, black, crab-like creatures crawled out of the sea at a snail's pace. Their slow speed made their return that much worse, prolonging the inevitable. They had been waiting, as all painful memories do, in the churning, deep, dark water of the ocean. They were messengers from the primordial deep, and Vivian was now faced with a choice she thought only applied to humans: act or react. She already knew she had waited too long to act. The Earth was experiencing remarkably swift changes that no scientist could explain away with global warming. Beatrice, the great mother of air, was to blame for some of them. She hadn't limited her wrath to the U.S. Many of the shores of Europe had been coated in silt. Now a light gray color, the beaches couldn't hide their sadness. The shadow of humanity had been drawn out of the protection of the ocean and washed up like a tidal wave of beached sea life. It was forcing mankind to look at its own darkness. Ocean, great mother of fire, had to take responsibility as well. Fire was volatile, and volatile energy was escaping the Earth's core through volcanic activity. Volcanoes were, surprisingly, more easily dealt with than the quiet migration of the rising tide. The sea was just like Vivian, great mother of water, reserved and commanding, yet lethal when necessary. Nothing could stop raging water. But all of the Earth's changes couldn't be blamed on the mothers. The greatest mother herself, Gaia, needed to stretch and change. If a house sat where fire or fresh water must flow, so be it. Humans were required to adapt. They could no longer believe the Earth was for conquering. Gaia had allowed people to live on her body, and they had proved horrendous stewards. Natural disasters were the Great Mother's way of healing, of purging their personal pain. Although selfish in motive, the disasters always helped collective humanity. It seemed people forgot their pettiness and self-absorbed lives when disaster struck, and remembered what life was truly about. Beauty always emerges out of destruction, Vivian said. Always.
Great. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about your novel Sky of Water and your Equal Night trilogy, can you describe your new novel and the trilogy?
Absolutely, yes. The Sky of Water is the last one. It is complete. The trilogy itself took me, gosh, about 7 years to finish writing, got to its completion. And I had come across the idea of the three great mothers who created the world: fire, air, and water. And that's actually in an ancient mystical text, the Jewish Kabbalah. And I thought that the idea was so intriguing. And I had never written fiction before. I wrote a nonfiction work, gosh, 2011, but fiction had never even crossed my mind. And then it was like it was an inspirational moment of, oh, gee, that would be a great idea for a trilogy. One book on fire, one book on air, and one book on water. And creating these larger than life characters of these great mothers who are all of grandmotherly age, but who have been on the planet since time began. And they, of course, have children and children's children, and they have a whole line. And our protagonist is actually the granddaughter of one of the mothers. And it's just a great multi-generational story of women, and there's romance in there. It is a fantasy fiction series. I try to incorporate, a lot of mystical elements, magic, but also bring it into today's world. The storyline happens around funnily enough, and this is perfect timing, everything is perfect timing, but around the 2020 presidential election in the US. And a lot of my changes in the world in the world of these books are of natural disaster in nature, not anything like we're experiencing in our world right now, but
Right.
vastly different, but also has an eerily similar theme to what is going on right now about having to adapt to a completely new world and having to muster up the power within to overcome and to emerge a better person on the other side of the challenges that we're facing. So it's been very interesting to see how our world right now is mirroring a lot of what I have written in these three books.
Yes. So what was the shift like for you to go from writing nonfiction and writing your first fiction in this trilogy?
I was very green in what I did not know. And so it was like the ignorance is bliss attitude of how hard can it be? And that I went down a road of a lot of self-discovery, a lot of tears, a lot of frustration, just not really giving it its due of how unbelievably hard it is. And so I really do take, I just bow to all of the fiction writers out there who can create worlds and the imagery and the description. That was really my sticking point, was in developing the imagery of a place and descriptive wording and all of that. I had no background in any of that at all. My dialogue was my wheelhouse, and that is really how I started a scene. Would be, okay, well, these characters are talking and I'm just letting them talk. And then, I'm realizing, okay, they're talking in this white space. I have to decorate it somehow. And that to me was my biggest challenge, just in learning how to really write authentic description of place and making it something that people could enjoy reading instead of just words on a page.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you end up outlining the trilogy extensively, or was it a more organic process? What was that like?
I've always been a pantser, not a
Hmm.
plotter,
Right.
and and that had served me well. I had the idea for the three. And I did not outline. I really didn't. It was more of I call it the headlight method, just seeing the couple feet in front and trusting that I will make it through to the end. And it's really trusting to your ability to connect to your imagination and trusting that you can do it. And so I got the first one done, and the first one took me 3 years. The second one took me a year, and then this third one took me 6 weeks. Wow. So it was just very interesting to see the progression, one, in my writing. Two, I had a feel for where I was going. It was much easier to finish, but I also felt like I could have been done in 2. And then I said, well, it says book of, I have to have 3 books
right.
in this trilogy. But I felt like the story, one part had really ended, complete in after the second book. And I thought, oh, gee, now what?
Yeah.
But there was, and I feel like, if you're open to really tapping into that ore of creativity, I could have written a 4th book. It is there. It's just really mining for the good and being willing to do the grunt work of the not so good that comes across the page to then get, writing the 2,000 words to get 500 good words.
Right.
It's a balance of both.
And so have you thought about what's next for you? Are you planning to write more fiction?
I have thought about writing middle grade. These books are geared toward women. They're adult books. There's romance in here, and I couldn't get the sex out of it. so I don't recommend them for teens, of course.
Right.
And so I have a son, he's in middle grade, and I would love to set my sights on middle grade fiction with strong characters who are flawed. One of the greatest compliments I got from my first book was that the protagonist is done well of a character who is strong but flawed. And I thought, hopefully that's all of us, right? And we find our worth despite the things we've done in the past that are, would be seen as less than perfect. And so I wanted to. I'm looking next towards finding that sweet spot, but just for a younger reader base.
That's great. So what advice would you have for aspiring writers who may be listening and are writing their own stories or novels?
My one most important thing, the thing that got me through, was really my connection to my creative voice. And we could call it divinity or my spirit within, my human spirit, my creative voice that is really what got me through. And also having, I don't want to say a mission in your books, but having a purpose for that story to be in the world, because I felt like these books, this trilogy, I wanted it to be, this was my dedication to the power of women and the power of the human spirit and overcoming anything. And so for someone writing a book, just to know that your story matters and to believe in that and connect to that passion, but also just that knowing that your story matters, because you go through this process and then, everybody is just willing to, pee on it and in a review, and then you're crying and you put your work out there, but at the end of the day, it's knowing that your story mattered, even if no one read it. It still matters in the universe that it's out in the world.
Right. And what books, fiction or nonfiction, have you read recently that made an impression on you and that you would recommend?
I've always been, it's interesting. I wrote fiction. I've always been a nonfiction writer. A lot of books on spirituality and mysticism and ancient cultures, women's history. That's always been my go-to. What's funny is I was actually reading the Daisy book. What is it? Daisy and the Six, Daisy Jones and the Six, which is a fiction book, and it was just such a light read. And I thought she did her job well because I forgot it was fiction. And I thought, okay, well, who is this band? And I started looking them up, and I thought, oh my God, this is fiction. Thought, oh my gosh. But and she was brilliant. It was interesting. I could find nuggets of truth and inspiration in a fiction book. And so I would recommend that. That's the latest book I've read. And because people are always looking for inspiration in nonfiction, but there is inspiration in fiction stories too, and in myth and in words that fictional characters can say. It doesn't have to be something that an actual person said. You can still get inspired by a fictional character, and hopefully so.
Gotcha. So where can people find you online if they're interested in learning more about you and your trilogy?
Well, I have a website. It is Stacey with an E, Stacey, StaceyLTucker.com. And I do all my blog posting there, and I have my books on there. They are available for purchase on my website as well. So
Great.
You can find all good things there.
Good. Well, again, we've been speaking with Stacey Tucker, author of the new novel Sky of Water, the third book in the Equal Night trilogy. Sky of Water and the two previous books in the trilogy are available now, so go grab a copy. And Stacey, thanks for doing this interview.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks a lot. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to get more books into your busy life. Listen to audiobooks during your commute, while doing chores, walking the dog, or just relaxing at home. All you need is a smartphone and the free Libro.fm app. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations and curated lists from people who know audiobooks best, your local bookseller. Reading and Writing Podcast special offer: get 2 audiobooks for the price of 1 with your first month of membership with code RWPodcast. That's code RWPodcast for 2 audiobooks for the price of 1 for your first month of membership at Libro.fm.